Her daughter-in-law sprayed air freshener the moment she sat down. Lois Kramer, retired florist and widow, didn't say a word. Kayla smirked, waved the can again, and whispered, "Citrus covers everything." By sunrise, her name was scrubbed from the will, the deed, and the family trust. Lois had arranged bouquets for decades. Now she was trimming rot. And when they asked what changed, the attorney handed them the envelope. "Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe." The house smelled like cinnamon rolls, sun-warmed upholstery, and nostalgia, until it didn't. Virginia Ginny Alcott had just lowered herself gently into her usual chair at the long oak dining table, the one she'd polished for decades and once hosted bridal showers around, when a sharp hiss sliced through the quiet. A cold mist of synthetic fragrance descended on her silver hair and the shoulders of her blouse. She did not flinch. She did not move. But inside, something final settled into place. "Oh, sorry. It's just habit," Lacey chirped from behind, holding the bright green aerosol can high in one hand, its plastic nozzle still glistening. She gave a little cough, performative, not persuasive, and added with an air of innocence so forced it was insulting, "Didn't even realize I was doing it." The smell was called mountain linen, but it reminded Ginny more of a motel lobby trying too hard to hide the smell of mold. It stung at the edges of her sinuses and carried with it a deep insult, as if she were not family, but something to be covered up, neutralized. Across the table, Maya paused with her fork suspended midair, the tines tangled with eggs and spinach. Her expression didn't shift, but her eyes darted to her grandmother's face, waiting, hoping for a reaction that never came. Eric, ever the diplomat in denial, kept his gaze on the plate as he sliced into a biscuit. He cleared his throat, once, lightly, but said nothing. That had become his pattern in recent years, recognized the offense only enough to pretend he hadn't. Ginny, still seated, folded her hands in her lap. The sunlight filtering through the kitchen window caught the veins in her wrists and made the gold of her wedding ring glow. She waited a moment longer before reaching into the pocket of her apron and retrieving her phone. A single text from Charlene blinked on the screen. "You all right?" Ginny didn't hesitate. Her reply was short, measured, and final. Not yet, but soon. Lacey sat down across from her, folding her napkin with unnecessary flair. "Really, I didn't mean anything by it. It's just a reflex. Ginny's not sensitive." "I don't think she minds," Eric said without looking up, his tone thin with false reassurance, like a man throwing paper towels on a grease fire. Maya shifted in her seat. Ginny smiled politely and spoke for the first time since the spray. "Maya, sweetheart, would you pass me the preserves?" Her voice was calm, even melodic, like a note struck on an old piano. Soft, but resonant. Maya slid the jar of blackberry preserves across the table without a word. Ginny took her time spreading the jam across the half slice of toast on her plate, careful not to tear the bread. Her hands, though older and lined with years of pruning roses and tying ribbons, moved with practiced grace. As she lifted the toast to her lips, Lacey chuckled again, that brittle laugh she reserved for moments when she wanted control disguised as charm. "Honestly, Mom, I think the spray just came out automatically. I didn't even think." Ginny took a bite of toast, chewed slowly, then set it back down. She dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin and stood, smoothing the wrinkles in her apron with deliberate poise. "I think I'll take care of a few things upstairs," she said with a slight nod, "before I forget." "But it's brunch," Lacey said, smiling too brightly. "You barely sat down." Ginny met her gaze without malice, without warmth. "Yes, I did." She left the room with steady steps, passing the grandfather clock in the hallway just as it struck 9. The chimes echoed like a subtle warning down the hardwood floors. In her bedroom, the light through the curtains was a soft, forgiving gold. She didn't turn on the lamp. She didn't need to. She walked straight to the far corner, where a wide walnut desk sat beneath the window. It was older than Eric, older even than her marriage, but still solid, still hers. She crouched down, felt beneath the drawer for the small brass key she kept taped there, and turned the lock. The drawer opened with a familiar creak, the kind of sound that made memory feel like a living thing. Inside, under a leather ledger and a folder marked Utilities, lay the red file she hadn't opened in nearly a year. It was heavy, despite its size, because it held the weight of every decision she hadn't yet made, but now would. Ginny placed it on the desk and opened the cover. The first page bore her name. The second listed Eric. The third, Lacey's, in large, well-inked font. She stared at it for a long moment, her fingers tracing the line of text like it might vanish on its own. Then she picked up her pen, clicked it once, and drew a single, steady line through Lacey's name. The chair creaked softly beneath Ginny as she settled back into it that evening, not the one in the dining room, but the wide leather rocker in her sunroom, the one no one ever dared rearrange. She kept it angled just enough to see the backyard maple tree, but still within reach of the radiator in winter. In front of her, the red file lay open like a courtroom, documents spread across the low wooden table like pieces of evidence. She hadn't needed to look through these pages in years, not since her estate planner had sent her the initial draft of the trust, typed in polite legalese and printed on expensive paper. But now, with Lacey's name stamped in clean black ink across page after page, the words read like trespass. There it was again. Lacey Alcott, contingent co-beneficiary. Then again, successor trustee, joint authorization with Eric Alcott. It wasn't just inclusion, it was ambition. Ginny drew in a slow breath through her nose, then reached for her reading glasses. As she adjusted them on her face, her mind drifted back to a moment that had seemed small at the time. A casual cruelty, the kind Lacey often wrapped in lace. They were sitting on the porch last summer, just the two of them, sharing a pot of coffee Ginny had brewed the way she always did, strong, black, with a splash of cream. Lacey had sipped once and wrinkled her nose. "You know," she'd said with a smile too tight to be friendly, "you should really consider switching to tea. Coffee breath can linger, especially at your age." At the time, Ginny had smiled back, unbothered on the outside. But now, in the hush of her own sunroom, the memory echoed differently. It wasn't about coffee. It never had been. It was about erosion. Small, daily efforts to sand down Ginny's place in her own life. She leaned forward and reached into the bottom drawer of the table, pulling out a narrow, zippered pouch that held her household account books. Ginny had tracked every expense by hand for decades. Rental income from the duplex, property taxes, water bills, even the cash tips she used to give her flower shop drivers. She opened the ledger for this year and began flipping through pages inked with meticulous cursive. The numbers told a quiet but firm story. Ownership, contribution, worth. By 10:37 p.m., the only light in the room came from the antique lamp beside her chair, its brass base warm from hours of use. The rest of the house had gone dark, and with it the sounds of the outside world. All Ginny could hear was the gentle tick of the clock above her hutch and the rustle of papers as she drafted a fresh list in her notepad. Property, primary residence rental units, address plus tax IDs, business proceeds from former florist accounts jewelry, appraised pieces only. She didn't hesitate as she wrote. She had always known what she had. It was time to ensure it went where it belonged. The phone rang once in the stillness. Not a text. A call. She reached for it with fingers that didn't tremble. "Ron," she said, already knowing who it would be. His number wasn't one she needed to look at to recognize. He'd handled her affairs since before Maya was born. His voice came through, low and steady. "Evening, Gin. Thought I might hear from you this week. I need a rewrite," she said simply. Quietly. No alerts, no notifications to the current listed parties. "You're not the first one to come to that realization," he said, without amusement. "I've got the original trust on file. We can start from there." "Good," Ginny said, closing the red folder and sliding it back into the drawer. "I'm done giving people titles they haven't earned." Ron let the silence stretch for a respectful beat before adding, "You're sure you want to move them off completely?" "I'm sure they moved me first," she replied. From the table, From the family photos, from the conversations, this is just catching up. There was a soft click as she ended the call. Ginny remained still for a long moment, the phone resting on her lap. Then, with deliberate care, she stood, walked to the kitchen, and retrieved a cup of decaf. No tea, no sugar, no apologies. She brought it back to the sunroom and sat in her chair again, this time with the steaming mug balanced on one knee. She took a sip, letting the bitterness spread across her tongue like truth. It was just after 5 the next afternoon when Maya knocked gently on the back door. 2 soft taps, a pause, then one more. Ginny recognized the pattern immediately. It was the same way Maya used to knock when she was a child, sneaking over for a popsicle after dinner, back when Ginny's house still felt like a playground and not a battleground. Ginny opened the door to find her granddaughter, standing there, flushed from the July heat and clutching a canvas tote that looked heavier than it should. "I brought the rest of the chargers and my old scanner," Maya said, stepping inside. "And, I think I need to tell you something." Ginny gestured toward the sunroom without a word. They walked there in quiet rhythm, neither rushing nor dragging their feet. Once they were seated, Ginny in her chair, Maya cross-legged on the rug, she waited. Maya set the tote down with a sigh. "I wasn't going to say anything. I didn't want to start drama or stir things up. But something happened this morning that—" She paused. "It just tipped me." Ginny raised one eyebrow gently, the invitation to continue given without pressure. "I watched Mom take your toothpaste out of the upstairs cabinet," Maya said, voice low but steady. "She didn't throw it out right away. First, she sniffed it like it was spoiled milk. Then she dropped it in a plastic bag and shoved it into the garage trash. Like it was toxic." Ginny tilted her head slightly but said nothing. "She's also been hiding your shoes. The black flats with the gold buckle. I found them under the basement stairs. She told me they looked unpolished and made the house feel dated." Ginny's hands remained folded in her lap, the expression on her face unreadable, but her eyes didn't blink. "I'm sorry," Maya added quickly. "I should have told you sooner." "No," Ginny said, her voice as calm as still water. "But you told me now. That matters." Maya looked down, ashamed. "They try to make me small," Ginny continued as if observing weather. "But I've lived through harder people than your mother." She reached toward the ottoman, pulled out a pale blue envelope from under a stack of magazines, and handed it to Maya. Inside were a dozen yellowed receipts, some handwritten, others faded credit card slips, birthday brunches, Target gift runs, an air conditioner she'd paid for in Eric and Lacey's first apartment. All dated, all stored, all forgotten, except by her. Maya scanned them in silence, her fingers trembling just slightly at the edges. "You kept all of this?" "They keep receipts of slights," Ginny said simply. "I keep receipts of expenses." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Maya nodded, unzipping her bag and pulling out a small flatbed scanner. "I'll digitize everything," she said. "That way it's searchable, backed up. You never know who'll try to gaslight you into generosity later." Ginny almost laughed. As Maya connected the cables and powered on the device, Ginny leaned forward and pushed a small wooden box across the table. "While you're at it, let's start fresh." Maya opened the lid to find more receipts, a few handwritten ledgers, and a small folded index card with a bank routing number. "I opened a new account this morning," Ginny said. "Separate from everything else. It's under a new LLC with no family names attached. Only 2 people have access, Ron and you." Maya blinked. "Wait, me?" "I trust you to be the last one standing," Ginny said, pouring herself a glass of water, "and the only one who wouldn't sell my memory for a second kitchen island." They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes. The whir of the scanner, the gentle click of pages turning, the scent of old paper and iced lemon water filled the room. It could have been peaceful, if not for the quiet ache behind it all. Just as Maya finished scanning the last page, Ginny's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up and squinted at the screen, her brows pinching briefly together. "It's Charlene," she said. "She just sent me a screenshot." Maya set the scanner down, curious. "What kind of screenshot?" Ginny tapped, opened the message, then slowly rotated the phone toward her granddaughter. Across the screen was a group text thread, Lacey's name at the top, filled with messages between her and two friends. One read, "I swear, the woman smells like mothballs and old soap. If Eric won't tell her, I might just start spraying Raid." Another followed, "She's like a haunted doily." Ginny's expression didn't change. She locked the phone and set it aside. Maya exhaled, trying to find words, but Ginny already had them. "Rot spreads faster when you pretend it's perfume." The paperwork was spread across the dining room table like a polite ambush. Lacey had waited until late morning to bring it up, just long enough to pretend it wasn't premeditated. Ginny walked in from the garden to find a pen, 2 cappuccinos, and a neat folder with color-coded sticky tabs all waiting for her. "Oh good, you're back," Lacey said brightly, stepping around the table like a real estate agent showing off a listing. "I figured we could go over the documents while things are still quiet. The lawyer just needs a few final signatures." Ginny set her gardening gloves down on the counter and brushed soil from her palms with slow, practiced movements. Her fingers smelled of rosemary and earth. She didn't answer right away. "It's just that some of the new property laws, taxes, zoning, whatever, are changing soon," Lacey continued. "We thought it'd be easier to get ahead of it for your peace of mind. You're on everything, of course." Ginny walked toward the table without hurrying. She slid the folder open with her index finger and scanned the top sheet. Her name was there, yes, printed carefully at the top, but beneath it, in larger font and multiple instances, were Eric's and Lacey's. Co-signatory, succession, dual authorization. Ginny read quietly, her voice not rising, not even questioning, just naming. Eric stepped into the room holding a mug. "We thought it'd streamline things, Mom, in case anything happens. Just practical stuff." "Practical," Ginny repeated, her tone light. "That's a good word for it." Lacey chuckled. "We're not pushing anything, I promise. I mean, obviously you're still fully in charge. This is just to avoid headaches down the line. We even highlighted your parts, see?" She pointed to a series of orange tabs, like a child showing off gold stars on a homework sheet. Ginny didn't sit. Instead, she slowly closed the folder, aligning its corners precisely before looking up. "You don't want my blessing," she said. "You want my name." There was a pause, a brief flicker of something behind Eric's eyes that he tried to bury with a sip of coffee. Lacey's smile thinned. "I think you're reading into it. We've always said you're included." Ginny stepped around the table, picked up the pen Lacey had so helpfully laid out, and turned it between her fingers. "That's interesting," she said, walking toward the sink. "Because when I was being sprayed like a roach last week, I didn't feel especially included." Eric let out a long breath. "Mom, please, let's not bring that up again. It wasn't meant to offend." Ginny turned and faced them both, her posture straight, her tone still measured but glacial. "Then why did it?" Lacey opened her mouth, but nothing coherent followed. The silence filled in the space like fog. Ginny set the pen down beside the folded folder and walked back toward the hallway. "Where are you going?" Eric asked. "To get my hands clean," she said over her shoulder. "Paper tends to smudge when it's touched with dirt." As her footsteps echoed down the hallway, Lacey turned to Eric, her voice low and urgent. "She's stalling. She's going to talk to that old lawyer again, isn't she?" Eric rubbed his temple. "You know how she is. She always needs time." "She doesn't need time," Lacey hissed. "She needs to get over herself. This is about the family, about preserving what she built." "She's not dead," Eric muttered. "And she's not stupid." Back in the bedroom, Ginny washed her hands slowly at the basin, watching the soil slip away in ribbons down the drain. She didn't rush. When she finished, she dried her hands with the monogrammed towel she'd received on her 50th wedding anniversary, a gift from Eric, back when gifts still came from thought rather than obligation. She walked to the phone and dialed the only number she needed. Ron answered after 2 rings. "Still not signing, huh?" "I'll be by Thursday," she said. "I want the entire structure changed." "Understood. Same trust file?" "Yes, but I want it annotated this time," she said, her voice sharper now. "Footnoted, clear. I'm done with subtlety." "Got it. You're the author now." "I always was," Ginny replied. "I just forgot to write in ink." The clerk at the Fayette County Records Office barely looked up when Ginny slid the documents across the counter. "I need these filed under the updated trust name," she said, her tone polite but impersonal. The woman adjusted her glasses, squinted at the papers, and gave a small nod. "Everything looks in order. Revocable trust, dated and notarized. Want confirmation mailed or emailed?" "Both," Ginny replied, folding her hands atop her handbag. When the clerk asked if she wanted to wait for stamped copies, Ginny said she would. She took a seat by the window, her back straight, her breath calm. Outside, traffic droned and the heat shimmered on the sidewalks, but inside, she felt still, anchored. By the time she left, all 3 properties, the house she was born in, the 2 rentals she'd managed for decades, no longer belonged to Virginia Alcott, the individual. They were now sheltered under the Alcott Evergreen Trust. It was a name she'd chosen deliberately, one that sounded timeless and impersonal, like something too big to challenge. Back home, the air inside the house felt subtly different, like the walls had finally stopped holding their breath. Ron called later that afternoon to confirm the utility accounts had been rerouted to the trust entity. Water, gas, trash, security, all now under a name no one else in the family could touch. "She's going to notice," Ron warned. "Eventually." "She'll notice when she needs to," Ginny replied, unscrewing the lid from a glass jar of loose chamomile tea. "Not before." The next file they handled was the health proxy. Ginny had kept Lacey listed on the old form out of routine more than trust, back in the days when it still felt like appearances mattered, but now she removed her completely. Maya's name went in her place, along with Ron's as backup. It wasn't about dramatics. It was about clarity. Clarity had become Ginny's religion. The following Sunday, she hosted Charlene for tea in the sunroom. The 2 women sat surrounded by flickering sunlight and the faint scent of lemons and mint. Ginny poured the tea with a steady hand and passed over a plate of shortbread cookies. Charlene accepted both, but tilted her head. "You're too calm. That always means something's been finalized." Ginny didn't deny it. "Everything's under the trust now, every inch of it, down to the rug beneath your chair." Charlene gave a soft whistle. "And the heirs?" "Updated. Health care?" "Secured." Charlene leaned back with a satisfied smile. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." Ginny stirred her tea slowly. "It's not a bad side, just the one that remembers." For a moment, there was only the sound of spoons tapping china, the distant hum of cicadas. Ginny let the quiet fill the space before continuing. "She's been taking things," Ginny said finally, as if the words were fragile and needed to land softly. Charlene's eyes sharpened. "Lacey?" Ginny nodded. "Little pieces, jewelry mostly. Nothing obvious, nothing flashy, but I noticed. The garnet brooch I wore to Maya's kindergarten recital? Gone. My mother's porcelain sewing thimble? Disappeared last month." Charlene's grip on her teacup tightened. "You sure?" "I'm not senile. I'm just not loud." Ginny's tone was razor-sharp and quiet all at once. "She thinks I won't say anything, that I'll die before it matters." Ginny looked out toward the yard, her voice low. "She forgets I know how to inventory a life." Charlene sipped her tea, slower now, absorbing the weight of it. "You going to confront her?" "Eventually," Ginny said. "But not with words." She stood, walked over to a side cabinet and retrieved a velvet pouch. She placed it gently on the table between them. Charlene opened it and raised her brows. It was empty. "That's how I'm returning everything she's ever taken," Ginny said. "Empty space, documented absence, a box full of what she never earned." Charlene let out a short breath, part admiration, part concern. "She's not going to take that quietly." "She'll take it in silence," Ginny said. "Because it won't come from me. It'll come from the paper she never bothered to read." Ginny waited until the house was empty, completely, verifiably empty, before retrieving the key. It was taped behind the frame of a faded watercolor hanging in her bedroom, a painting no one ever asked about because it was neither valuable nor particularly beautiful. It was safe. That's why she chose it. She slid the frame aside, peeled off the aged masking tape, and retrieved the small brass key from behind it. Then she knelt, opened the lower drawer of her lingerie chest, and lifted out a folded stack of linens. Beneath the second layer was a matte black case, small, square, and unmarked. Inside was the micro-camera system she'd installed herself back in March after Lacey had borrowed her diamond studs for a gala and forgotten to return them. Ginny never accused. She never even asked. She simply adapted. She took the small laptop from the drawer above, connected the micro SD card, and opened the viewer. The footage loaded in silence. A grainy timestamp blinked in the lower right corner. Thursday, 2:17 p.m. Ginny fast-forwarded through still shots of her empty room, flickers of morning light across the dresser, shadows shifting with time. Then, movement. Lacey entered the frame with the casual ease of someone walking into a room they believe is theirs. She wasn't snooping exactly, not yet. She moved toward the mirrored jewelry box on the dresser and opened it, glancing toward the door once, then again. Her hand reached inside. She hesitated. Then, with her fingers pinched just so, she slipped something into the front pocket of her handbag. Ginny paused the frame, zoomed in. A familiar glint caught the light. The freshwater pearl necklace with the oval onyx clasp, her mother's. Ginny stared at the screen, not with shock, but with the silent confirmation of something she'd already known. She let the footage run, watching Lacey close the box, smooth her blouse, and walk out without a sound. Ginny downloaded the clip, labeled the file 3B Pearl Theft 0725, and transferred it to an encrypted folder on the laptop. She printed a screenshot, just one, mid-action, and slid it into a manila envelope already addressed to Ron Talley. Her phone buzzed. "Ron Talley." "Update?" she called him. "I've got footage," she said. Dated, clear. You can see her hand inside the jewelry box. Ron let out a long exhale. "Do you want to report it now? Or hold it?" Ginny leaned back in her chair. "We're not pressing charges." "No?" "Not yet," she said. "I want the theft to age like cheese." There was a pause on the line. Then a small chuckle. "That's a new one. It needs to ferment. It needs to rot in the background of her every interaction with me," Ginny said, her voice calm but flinty. "A moment that stays unwelcome and unrevealed, until I decide." Ron didn't argue. "Understood. I'll store the file. Flag it, but sit on it. Thank you." She ended the call and tucked the laptop back into its drawer, pressing the linens neatly over the top. The brass key returned to its spot behind the painting. The room looked untouched again, but now it knew better. Later that evening, Maya wandered into the hallway after returning from class. She was halfway to her room when she heard voices drifting from the kitchen below. Her mother was on the phone, tone syrupy but louder than she realized. "No, it's real," Lacey was saying. "I finally upgraded. Genuine pearls. Not those hand-me-downs I used to wear. These ones came in a velvet box and everything." Maya stood still, her fingers tightening around the banister. "You should have seen the look on the lady's face at Nordstrom," Lacey continued. "I told her, 'I'm done with cheap family history.' She practically applauded." Maya didn't move. She didn't speak. But she heard every syllable. The brunch was Lacey's idea. She'd sent out a breezy group text earlier in the week. Family meal Sunday. Casual. Mimosas, biscuits, low drama, like she hadn't spent the last month treating Ginny's presence like a mildew stain she couldn't scrub out. Ginny had replied with a single word, "Sure." By noon, the table was set. Lacey had pulled out the nice plates with the blue and gold trim, the ones she always claimed were family heirlooms, but had actually come from a discount consignment store. Maya sat on Ginny's left. Charlene had been invited at the last minute, casually but clearly as a PR move. "You two are close, right? Come keep her company." Eric poured mimosas like they were an olive branch. He glanced at his mother now and then, nervous but silent. Lacey kept the conversation light, recipes, TikTok trends, something about a scented candle brand she was influencing now. Then, as the second round of biscuits hit the table, Ginny reached for her phone. She didn't say a word. With one flick of her finger, she tapped a photo file and hit share nearby. The air around the table filled with a faint ding, followed by a polite chime from Lacey's phone. Lacey glanced down, expecting some cutesy brunch selfie or Maya's new campus photos. Instead, her face froze. She blinked once, then again. then slowly turned the screen toward herself for a closer look. Everyone else kept eating. The photo was grainy but unmistakable, Lacey's hand mid-motion, reaching into the mirrored jewelry box, a pearl necklace visible between her fingers. Time-stamped, dated, and framed just so. Her fingers curled around the phone like she could crush it. "What the hell is this?" she said, her voice shrill but just under the threshold of a scream. Ginny didn't look up. She buttered her biscuit with perfect calm, letting the edge of the knife slice through the golden crust. "Is there something wrong with the picture?" "You sent this to me?" Lacey hissed. "This is some kind of threat?" "No," Ginny said, finally looking up. "It's documentation." Eric leaned forward, confused. "What's going on?" "She's spying on me now," Lacey snapped. "She put a camera in her room to catch me doing nothing." Ginny sipped her coffee. "Nothing has a face then? And a handbag." Charlene let out a small cough, which didn't fool anyone. It was a laugh in disguise. She raised her tea mug and tapped it gently against the table. "To quiet power," she said, almost to herself. Maya stared down at her plate, the corners of her mouth twitching. "Grandma," she murmured, "that was tactical." "I don't raise my voice," Ginny said, folding her napkin slowly. "I just raised the stakes." Lacey stood abruptly, pushing back from the table so hard her chair bumped the hutch behind her. "You've lost it," she spat. "This is toxic, manipulative, and illegal." Eric stood too, trying to intercept. "Lace, calm down. Let's just talk about—" But she was already heading for the door, her heels clicking across the hardwood like punctuation marks. "I'll remember this," she shouted as she opened the door. "Don't think this is over." Ginny looked at her biscuit, still warm, still whole. "You're right," she said softly, though Lacey was already gone. "It's not over." Eric hesitated in the doorway, eyes bouncing between his mother, his daughter, and the friend sipping tea, like this was all a well-rehearsed play. "What's going on with you?" he asked, not angry, just confused and a little frightened. Ginny met his eyes, calm as ever. "I'm remembering things too, Eric, that's all." Charlene smiled faintly. "She's writing things down now." Eric said nothing else. He stepped outside after Lacey, leaving the door open behind him. For a moment, all that remained was the faint chirp of a sparrow on the windowsill and the smell of butter and citrus in the air. Ginny pushed her plate forward slightly, folded her hands, and turned to Maya. "Will you help me send one more file?" she asked. "Sure," Maya said, leaning in. "To who?" Ginny smiled. Ron Talley looked up from his worn leather desk pad just as the glass door swung open and caught against the wall with a sharp thud. Eric entered first, tense but civil. Lacey followed like a storm front, bag slung over one shoulder, phone in hand, sunglasses still perched on her head, though they were already indoors. "Afternoon," Ron said, barely blinking. "You're early." "We didn't want to wait for an appointment," Lacey said, her voice clipped, almost rehearsed. "This situation seems urgent." Ron gestured toward the two chairs across from his desk, the same ones clients had sat in for over 30 years. Births, deaths, disputes, dissolutions. These seats had absorbed every kind of family silence imaginable. "Sit," he said simply. Lacey did, crossing one leg over the other, her knee bouncing. Eric followed, more cautious, rubbing his palms along his khakis. "We need to talk about the trust changes," Eric said carefully. "Mom isn't exactly communicating with us anymore." "She's communicating plenty," Lacey snapped. "In riddles, in veiled threats, through petty theatrics and passive-aggressive brunches." Ron folded his hands. "And what exactly do you want clarified?" Lacey dropped her phone on the desk, open to a screenshot of the property filings. "This. Everything being moved under something called the Alcott Evergreen Trust. We weren't informed. We didn't agree. That's not how family works." Ron looked at the screen briefly before sliding the phone back toward her with one finger. "It's a revocable living trust. Legally valid. All filings notarized and recorded. No co-signatories required. But we're listed as beneficiaries." "Were," Ron corrected. "You were listed on a previous version. That document was superseded 3 weeks ago." Eric blinked. "She changed all of it?" She updated what was hers to update. Lacey leaned forward, her voice dropping an octave. She's being manipulated. She's vulnerable. She's 72. She still writes checks by hand. Ron tilted his head slightly. You know what else she still does by hand? Cross-references tax schedules, catalogs assets, annotates clauses in blue pen. She's not vulnerable. She's precise. Lacey's jaw clenched. She put surveillance in her bedroom. And found evidence of theft, Ron said evenly, not raising his voice, not blinking. Which, for the record, she has neither reported nor weaponized, yet. Eric turned to her. You said she was bluffing. I thought she was. Ron leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. The only manipulation here, Mrs. Alcott, was hiding a necklace and calling it forgetfulness. Eric's mouth opened slightly. You knew? Ron nodded once. She always did. She just chose timing over temper. For a moment, the room fell into an airtight silence, thick with implications. Lacey stood too quickly. Her chair scraped the tile. This isn't fair, she said. She's cutting us out of everything over feelings. No, Ron said. She's correcting an imbalance. You were written into her future without earning a place in her present. Lacey turned to Eric, eyes wide, but he looked away. Ron slid a copy of the updated trust across the desk. You can read it, but you can't change it. I'm her daughter-in-law, Lacey snapped. You're not her heir, Ron replied. The attic was warm, heavy with the scent of cedar and old paper. Ginny climbed the steps slowly, not because her body was frail, but because this part of the process demanded reverence. She knelt beside the cedar chest with a low groan of the knees, easing the lid open like a vault. Inside were the albums, 3 thick, leather-bound books embossed with gold lettering. Alcott Family, 1969 to 1999, 2000 to 2010, and the most recent, still incomplete, marked Legacy. Ginny lifted the last one into her lap and opened it to a page she'd memorized years ago. The photo was centered and captioned in black script. Alcott 40th Anniversary, Surprise Brunch, May 2012. There they were, Eric with his hand on Lacey's back, Lacey mid-laugh with a mimosa raised, Ginny in the corner of the frame, cropped halfway by someone's elbow. It had always felt unbalanced, and now it looked it. She slid her fingers beneath the plastic film and peeled the photo away, slowly, carefully, until the glue released. One by one, she removed the moments that no longer belonged to her memory. Birthdays where she'd been seated by the trash can. Holidays where her name had been forgotten on place cards. That awkward photo at Maya's high school graduation, where Lacey had insisted on standing in the center, blocking Ginny almost completely. By the time she closed the book again, it was thinner, but lighter. Downstairs, Maya waited at the dining table with her laptop open, a scanner to her left and a half-eaten piece of apple cake to her right. Ginny set the album beside her. You sure you want to do this? Maya asked. I'm sure I'm the one who gets to decide how I'm remembered, Ginny said. That's the part they never understand. For the next hour, they scanned photos. Real ones. Maya's 5th grade science fair with the volcano Ginny helped her build. Ginny holding her first bouquet after opening her flower shop. A candid from a community potluck where she'd worn her favorite navy apron, mid-laugh, head thrown back like she hadn't felt small in years. They arranged them chronologically, no captions needed. Maya added one final slide with soft piano music and a title. Graham's Life, Unfiltered. You want to share it privately or make it public? Maya asked. Post it, Ginny said. Let them know whose story it was all along. Later that evening, the doorbell rang. Ginny opened the door to find Lacey standing there with sunglasses pushed up on her head as always. She was holding something wrapped in tissue, another token peace offering disguised as civility. Just wanted to drop this off, Lacey said, thrusting the bundle forward. Eric thought you might like copies of the old albums. You know, for sentimental reasons. Ginny didn't reach for it. Did you remove us? Lacey asked, her voice tightening. From the albums, from the slideshow, from everything? Ginny didn't blink. I removed what didn't belong. This is rewriting history. This is correcting the edit, Ginny replied. Lacey folded her arms. "You're destroying family unity." Ginny stepped out just slightly onto the porch, her voice calm but resolute. "Unity doesn't mean abuse dressed as brunch." Lacey's mouth twitched, trying to form something sharp, but no words came. Charlene's voice called from behind the screen door. "Ginny, did you get my delivery?" Ginny turned. "What delivery?" Charlene appeared, holding up a small box wrapped in craft paper. "It's from that Etsy shop. Mug came in this morning." Ginny opened it slowly. Inside, nestled in tissue, was a white ceramic mug stamped in bold navy letters, "Still not dead. Still on the deed." Ginny laughed, an honest, low chuckle that made Lacey flinch. She held the mug up in a toast. "I'll drink my tea from this while I delete your Christmas photos." The house had never been loud, but now it was quiet with purpose. Ginny moved from room to room with a legal pad in hand, its pages already half filled with neatly drawn lines and bullet points. Every time she paused in front of something, a framed watercolor, a decorative lamp, an ottoman with hidden storage, she asked herself one question: did I choose this, or did someone assume I should have it? The answer came easily. In the living room, she listed the sofa Eric and Lacey had gifted one Christmas, unasked. Lacey had insisted on updating the decor, called the Floral Chintz Geriatric. That sofa was the first to go. Ginny had it picked up the next morning by a local women's shelter. By Tuesday afternoon, the home was 28 items lighter, and Ginny's records 28 lines deeper. She sat at the kitchen table, her glasses low on her nose, reviewing the master list. $1,500, car down payment, Eric's 30th, $950, summer tuition support, Maya, 2020, $3,100, first month's rent plus deposit, 2011, Eric and Lacey, newlyweds, $420, flower arrangements for Lacey's influencer shoot, unreimbursed. There was no malice in the way she tallied, only memory made tangible. Each line a tether, each amount a bookmark in a history they pretended had been effortless. Maya leaned over her shoulder. "You're not actually asking them to pay this back, are you?" "No," Ginny said. "These were gifts. But I'm documenting them as support, not investments. I want it noted." She flipped the page and attached a yellow sticky note across the top margin. On it, in blue ink, she wrote, "Support does not guarantee succession." She slid the ledger into a labeled folder, Personal Affairs, Final Draft, and tucked it into the fireproof chest beside the red trust binder. Later that day, they tackled the closets. Maya stood in the hallway, holding up a sequined clutch purse with a price tag still dangling from it. "This hers?" she asked. Ginny nodded without looking. "Bought it last spring, said it was mine. Never asked, just left the bag in the hall closet like I'd forget." Maya dropped it into the donation box, half laughing, half exhaling. "This feels sacred." "It is," Ginny said. "It's the final sweep." When they reached the front hallway, Ginny turned to the control panel beside the door. She punched in the old 4-digit security code, Eric's childhood birthday, and erased it without hesitation. The new code she entered was Maya's student ID number. "Just in case someone forgets whose house it is," she said. The system beeped. Confirmed. That Saturday, the garden club met in Ginny's backyard, an annual potluck of sorts, with sun hats, seed swaps, and gossip served in equal portions. Charlene stood at the edge of the patio, iced tea in hand, addressing the crowd like a town crier at a revolution. "Before we get started," she said, grinning, "just want to reintroduce our host, Virginia Alcott, full owner, no co-signers, no Klingons, landlord to nobody now." The women cheered, a polite but pointed ripple of approval. Ginny offered a tight smile, accepting the applause but not absorbing it. She wasn't doing this for validation, she was doing it for record. As the guests wandered toward the tomato beds and rose trellises, Maya leaned over to whisper, "You know that phrase you said earlier?" Ginny looked up. "Which one?" "Support doesn't guarantee succession." "I think that's going on a t-shirt." Ginny laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from Maya's cheek. "Put it next to the mug." The invitations were hand-delivered, sealed in cream-colored envelopes with no return address. Inside, a card printed in quiet serif type read, "You are invited to a living memorial in honor of Virginia Alcott. Still here, still deciding." It was Ginny's idea. "I'm tired of people waiting until someone dies to say anything kind," she told Maya. "I want to hear the words while I still have teeth to bite back with." By 6:30 Saturday evening, the dining room was aglow with low candlelight and the scent of rosemary and lemon. Ginny had polished the old silver herself, each fork placed with meticulous care beside bone-white plates. Her hair was swept into a neat chignon, and she wore a plum silk blouse that shimmered under the chandelier. There were only 6 seats around the table. Maya, Charlene, 2 neighbors from the garden club, Ginny's old florist apprentice, now married with 2 toddlers, and Ginny herself at the head, where no one could frame her out of the picture this time. The mood wasn't somber. It was reverent. Each woman brought a dish Ginny once served them. There was Maya's favorite poppy seed cake, Mrs. Taylor's broccoli rice casserole, and Charlene's deviled eggs, spiked with Tabasco and attitude. Ginny stood once everyone had been served. She clinked her glass lightly and unfolded a small stack of cream stationery from her place setting. "They say funerals are for the living, not the dead," she began, her voice strong, "but I've been dead in small pieces for years, and tonight I'd like to mark where I came back." She read 3 letters aloud, written not to anyone but to herself. The first was dated 10 years ago. A note to the woman who stayed quiet when she wanted to shout. "You are being edited in real time. Speak before you disappear." The second was from the year she'd closed her flower shop. "You built something beautiful. You don't owe anyone the keys." The last letter was recent, still fresh in the curve of her script. "You died the day you tolerated disrespect, and you lived again the moment you stopped calling it patience." The room was silent. Then Charlene let out a soft hum. "Then you're immortal, honey." Laughter followed, not loud but layered, like old wood floors creaking under warm feet. Maya lifted her glass. "To women who write their own endings," she said. They clinked their glasses in a gentle circle. For the first time in years, Ginny felt full without needing to be full of anything: defense, explanation, apology. She looked around the table and knew this was her inheritance. Later, as the dishes were cleared and the last of the wine poured, a pair of headlights swept across the front window. Maya peered through the blinds. "It's her," she whispered. Ginny didn't get up. Outside, Lacey's silver SUV slowed at the curb. The engine idled. Her window was halfway down, her posture angled toward the house, like she was trying to see inside. The soft glow of laughter and candlelight spilled onto the porch through the windows. Lacey lingered, watching, waiting. Maya turned back to her grandmother. "You want me to close the blinds?" "No," Ginny said, cutting another bite of cake. "Let her wonder what life looks like when she's not in the photo." It was nearly dusk when Ginny pulled the last donation box from beneath her bed. The cardboard had softened over the years from shifting humidity and slow weight, its corners slightly blunted from being moved too many times and opened too few. She placed it on the quilt, took a long breath, and opened the flaps with a deliberate stillness, like exhuming something sacred. Inside were the kinds of things people don't fight over in wills, but still measure one another by. A silk scarf she hadn't worn since her 60th birthday, a faded sweatshirt of Eric's from college she'd held onto longer than she should have, the chipped porcelain dish Lacey once claimed looked too rural for modern taste. Ginny folded each item with careful hands, not because she still valued them, but because she'd once believed someone else did. She added one last thing, a frame. The photo inside was from a 4th of July barbecue 10 years earlier. Eric was at the grill, Lacey with a wine spritzer in one hand and a plastic flag in the other. Maya was crouched near a sparkler bucket. Ginny stood at the edge of the group, partly cropped, partly shadowed, her face mid-turn, as if even then she'd sensed she didn't belong entirely in the picture. She flipped the frame over and pressed a yellow sticky note to the back, her handwriting calm and centered. "I left myself behind in this moment." I took her back. Then she took out another sheet of paper, a heavier one, and wrote, slowly and without flourish, "To the ones who never valued me, keep this emptiness. It matches what you left behind." She folded the page and placed it neatly on top of the box's contents. Downstairs, Maya was drying dishes. When Ginny entered the kitchen with the box, Maya didn't speak at first. She just looked at her grandmother, then the cardboard, then back again. "Is that the last of it?" she asked softly. Ginny nodded. "It's the part they never asked for, which means it's the part they'll notice most." Maya wiped her hands on the towel and moved to take the box. "Want me to drop it off?" Ginny hesitated for a beat, then nodded once. Quietly, just the porch. No note, no knock. It was nearly dark when Maya drove across town. She parked a house down and walked the rest of the way, box in hand, careful to keep her footsteps quiet against the concrete. Eric and Lacey's porch light was on, glowing artificially warm above a wreath no one had taken down since spring. She set the box gently on the doormat, adjusting it so the address label faced the door. No sound came from inside. No dog barked. No blinds shifted. Back in the car, Maya didn't turn the engine on right away. She stared at the house for a moment longer, then drove off with the windows down and the radio silent. 2 hours later, her phone buzzed. "Lacey, iMessage. Did you leave something on our porch?" Maya stared at the screen for several seconds, her face unreadable. She placed the phone screen down on the side table and said nothing. No response, no explanation, no bait taken. In the living room, Ginny sat quietly with a glass of iced tea, flipping through a small photo album of Maya's college years. When her granddaughter returned, Ginny didn't ask what had happened. She didn't need to. The photo, the note, the absence, all of it had been delivered. Some messages speak louder when they're left unopened. The podium wasn't large, just a wooden lectern scuffed from years of being wheeled out for PTA meetings and city council budget arguments. But when Ginny stood behind it, the room quieted like church. The multipurpose room at the Glenn County Library was filled wall to wall. Folding chairs stretched into the stacks, where a few late arrivals leaned against shelves labeled legal reference and estate planning. Ginny adjusted the single microphone clip to her collar. Her notes rested in a plain manila folder, but she didn't look down. Not at first. She scanned the crowd, mostly women, many silver-haired, some in work scrubs or church dresses or the tidy fatigue of retirement. A few had brought daughters, granddaughters, nieces. Charlene was front row, arms crossed proudly, and Maya sat beside her with a laptop balanced on one knee. "Thank you for coming," Ginny began. Her voice was clear, low, deliberate. "Tonight's session is titled The Silent Rewrite, Protecting Dignity Through Documents. But let me start with a story." She didn't name names. She didn't need to. She spoke of invisible erasure, the kind that starts with being talked over at family dinners and ends with your own home no longer feeling like yours. She talked about how legacy isn't just money, it's agency, memory, presence. She told them about keeping receipts, literal and otherwise, and the moment she learned that politeness without boundaries was a form of self-burial. "You don't need to raise your voice," Ginny said, her tone like steady rain. "You need to raise your paperwork." The room rustled with pens. Women scribbled notes in spiral notebooks, on receipts, on the backs of grocery lists pulled from their purses. One woman recorded on her phone discreetly. Another whispered to her seatmate, "I wish my mama could have heard this." Ginny continued. She explained the basic protections: revocable trusts, power of attorney reassignment, health proxies that put love above obligation. She walked them through how to rename an asset with one signature, and how that signature could outlive any betrayal. When the Q&A ended, a woman from the local paper approached Ginny near the refreshment table, where the sugar cookies were almost gone, and the coffee had gone lukewarm. "I'm with the Glenn County Ledger," the woman said, her pen already poised. "Would you be willing to talk for a story? You've struck a nerve tonight, in the best way." Ginny blinked. "A story? We're doing a series on women reinventing legacy. You'd be perfect. People are calling you the Will Whisperer." Ginny's mouth twitched. "I've been called worse." By the following Thursday, the article had run. Full page, black and white photo of Ginny at the lectern, captioned, "Virginia Alcott, 72, speaks softly and signs boldly." Maya clipped the piece, scanned it, and posted it to a new newsletter they'd just launched together. It was called Stay on the Deed. They published tips for navigating estate protection, interviews with elder law attorneys, and stories from women who had decided to quietly fire the people who assumed they'd inherit their lives. Within 2 weeks, the subscriber count hit 4,000. But what moved Ginny most wasn't the numbers. It was the letter. It arrived one afternoon in a pale blue envelope, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper from someone named Louise in Chattanooga. "I don't know you," it began, "but someone forwarded me your newsletter. I'm 64. I let my son move into my house after his divorce. I've paid for repairs, groceries, even his car note. Last week I overheard him telling someone he basically owns the place." Ginny paused halfway through reading. Her throat felt thick. "Thanks to you," the letter ended, "I now own it again. On paper. And in my spine. Your words gave me a spine." Ginny read it twice before folding it back into the envelope and sliding it into the back of the fireproof chest. Later that night, Maya found her in the kitchen, barefoot, boiling tea. "Another reader?" Maya asked. Ginny nodded, slow and full. "She say thank you?" "She did," Ginny said, "but that's not what matters." "What does?" "She found her outline," Ginny said, pouring the water. "Now she gets to write the ending." The porch had always been Ginny's favorite part of the house, not for hosting, not for waving at passing neighbors or waiting on company, but for the stillness. That hush between morning and noon when the wind hadn't fully made up its mind and the birdsong was just irregular enough to feel unscripted. In late spring, the porch held warmth like memory, soft and residual, never cloying. Ginny settled into the wicker rocker with a fresh cup of mint tea and a light blanket across her knees. The blanket wasn't necessary, but familiar. She sipped slowly, her breath steady, her spine straight. Across the steps, planted just 2 weeks ago in a shallow clay bed, the lemon verbena had started to catch. New green had crept upward, tentative but sure. Ginny watched its leaves flutter gently under the breeze. Every now and then, she leaned in and pinched a sprig between her fingers, releasing its bright, medicinal scent into the air. It lingered, soft and citrus-sharp, like a good boundary. The porch had stayed quiet these past months. No unannounced visits, no unexpected knocks, no shadows of old entitlement at the edge of her property line. Peace didn't always arrive with trumpets. It came as absence, as the grace of space no longer taken. Maya visited every Sunday like clockwork, her arrival marked by the low hum of her aging hatchback and the scent of lavender hand cream when she leaned in for a hug. She brought stories from campus, professors who still used chalk, classmates who didn't understand basic taxes, a guy named Omar who wrote terrible poetry but made perfect brownies. They sat on the porch for hours sometimes, swapping updates and drinking tea, both women with their shoes kicked off, and their words unhurried. One afternoon, Charlene dropped by with a quart of strawberry preserves and her usual irreverence. "I see the peace lilies haven't wilted without Lacey's dramatic sighs to water them," she said, handing off the jar. Ginny chuckled, taking it without fanfare. "They're thriving, actually. Must be the silence." Charlene slid onto the porch swing and gave it a gentle push with her heel. "I told you she'd beg to be written back in." Ginny didn't flinch. She adjusted her teacup and looked out over the yard. "Then she can write her own chapter," she said quietly. "Not mine." Charlene raised her eyebrows in admiration, but said nothing more. Some victories didn't require narration. Later that week, Ginny pulled her worn medical folder from the fireproof chest and made one final update. Her emergency contact was no longer Eric. The line that had once read spouse of son in tidy block letters was now replaced in fresh blue ink with granddaughter, Maya Elise Alcott. She signed the form, dated it, and added it to the front of the file, secured beneath a paperclip like a seal of self-direction. It was a small act, quiet, but real. Saturday morning arrived warm and fragrant. Maya showed up in denim overalls, her hair tucked into a red bandana, carrying a carton of baby marigolds she said needed the kind of love only stubborn old ladies could give. Ginny took them with mock offense and genuine delight. As they knelt side by side planting near the garden bed, the house behind them stood calm and upright, unsupervised but secure. Every tile and hinge and window blind held Ginny's name, and no one else's. As they finished planting, Maya looked toward the porch. "You ever miss the noise?" she asked. Ginny wiped her hands on a towel and stood slowly. "Number, I miss being missed, but not by people who forgot how to see me." They sat again on the porch, both quiet for a long while. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed. A dog barked in a staccato rhythm, but no one pulled into the driveway. No one climbed the porch steps uninvited. Just as Ginny took another sip of her tea, her phone vibrated once. She didn't rush to check it. She didn't need to, because real presence, she'd learned, wasn't something you fought to keep. It was something that returned on its own, if it ever truly belonged. The office hadn't changed in years. Same amber light from the green glass banker's lamp. Same leather chairs with softened arms and a faint scent of cedar and legal ink. Ron's walls were lined with dusty law volumes that no one read anymore, but that still gave the room weight. Ginny sat opposite him, hands folded in her lap, a silk scarf tucked under the collar of her blouse. She looked like a woman attending her own coronation. Quiet, poised, unblinking. Ron slid the final folder across the desk. "Sign here," he said gently. Then one initial beside the date change. Ginny took the pen without a word, scanning the page. The section titled Trustee and Beneficiary Assignment was already highlighted. Lacey's name was gone. Not struck through, not footnoted. Gone. As if it had never been there. As if the woman who once trampled through Ginny's home in designer heels and borrowed jewelry had simply evaporated, taking her entitlement with her. Maya's name was listed now, full name, middle initial, all in capital letters. Ginny signed with slow precision, her signature neat, old-fashioned, deliberate. Ron placed the signed form in a secondary envelope marked Final-Archive Copy. He slid it into his file cabinet, locked it, then handed the original to Ginny in a thick, cream envelope. She took it, weightless in her palm but heavy with meaning, and tucked it into her handbag. Then she opened her purse again and pulled out a key. Silver, small, clean. The fireproof chest in her bedroom would hold the envelope by nightfall. Ron leaned back in his chair, watching her. He didn't offer coffee or small talk, just silence. "You know," he said eventually, his tone edged with something between admiration and curiosity, "you could have gone further. You could have kicked her out completely, pressed charges, seized assets." Ginny met his gaze and didn't blink. "No need. She'll resurface," he said. "People like that don't drift quietly." "I'm counting on it," Ginny said. "Let her circle, let her orbit. I don't need to exile her. I just needed her to see that the center moved." Ron chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You really meant it when you said you don't raise your voice." "I raise the consequences," she replied, "and the standard." She stood and smoothed the front of her skirt. There was no fanfare, no final statement. Just a nod, a faint smile, and the crisp closing of her handbag. When she left the office, the door swung shut behind her like punctuation. Back home, Ginny climbed the stairs without hurry. Maya was out for the afternoon, and the house felt still. The kind of still that signals completion, not absence. She opened the fireproof chest. Inside, documents sat like polished stones. The trust agreement, the proxy updates, the personal ledger of support. She added the new envelope to the center, locked the lid. Then she stood in front of the mirror. It wasn't vanity, it was verification. She studied herself not for flaws, but for alignment. She saw the woman who had once been talked over at every family gathering, who had once hesitated before correcting the way her own name was mispronounced, who had once given up the best seat at her own table just to keep the peace. That woman was no longer here. She stepped onto the porch where the marigolds nodded toward the sun and the lemon verbena whispered citrus into the breeze. Maya's car would pull in soon. Ginny had made lemonade. Real lemons, not the powdered kind. The phone buzzed once, a news alert, then silence. No apology came, no request for reconsideration, no final plea to be added back in. Ginny's lips curved, almost a smile, but not quite. Something deeper. She looked toward the sky, then down at her garden, where roots she'd planted had finally taken hold, quiet, strong, unmoving. She sat, lifted her tea, and whispered aloud, to no one and everyone. She treated me like a stench. I left her gasping for legacy,